Hello again, year 4. We're back with more history, and it's the Romans again. This week, it's the Roman invasion of Britain. Not the failed attempt, the attempted invasion of Britain. We're looking at the real deal this week. And our key question is, what happened when the Romans finally conquered Britain? Alongside our key question, we've got our learning objectives for the day. And just like last week, I'm not going to go into the full detail yet, but the three things we're going to focus on this week are identifying, examining, and ranking. So we'll go into those in a bit more detail shortly. Before we begin with the main lesson though, there's a little starter task that I'd like you to have a go at. So attached to the team's assignment, you will find some files, and in those files there are the maps. There's the Roman map of Britain and there's a modern day map of the UK. Can you compare this map of Roman Britain to the modern day map and see if you can identify the names of the towns and cities that you can see on this map here. Now some of them are a little bit more obvious than others. For example, you may be able to work out what Londinium is in modern day. That one's a bit of a giveaway, isn't it? But some of them are not quite as straightforward. So pause the video now and download those files and see if you can have a go at identifying some of those towns and cities. Now we'll look at some of the answers to that task at the end of the video. Now these are some of the key words from last week's lesson. They're the ones with the flashcards at the top there. There's a few other key words that we're going to add in this week. We've got aqueduct, legion, Roman governor, sewage and sewers. Now some of those may be familiar to you already. We did mention legion last week in fact, but we have the aqueduct, which is a system of pipes and channels which brings clean water into towns. The Roman governor was an important one, the ruler of Roman Britain who worked for the emperor. So he was in charge of Britain, but he worked for the emperor. The emperor gave him his orders. Sewage, the dirty water, and worse, which is poured down sewers from drains and lavatories, as in toilets. And the sewers are the pipes or tunnels that carry away sewage. I mentioned last week's key words. I also like to mention a few people's work from last week as well. So well done to Harley, Daniel, Phoebe and James, who given some really good answers to last week's assignment, looking at the reasons for the Roman invasion. So Harley had mentioned the fact that the Romans were after our resources: silver, iron bars, gold coins, slaves and farmland. Really important. And in fact they had to abandon invading Britain because of the revolt in France, in Gaul. Daniel again mentioned the resources. He's talked about the things that the Romans came looking for, but also he's pointed out that it was an attempt and it didn't succeed. And we focused on that a lot last week, didn't we? The fact that it was not successful. Phoebe had pointed out about the Celts being important because they were the British people at the time. They're the ones who resisted the Romans, who battled the Romans when they landed, if they'd come across the ocean. And finally James made some further important points about the Romans wanting to expand their empire and also to spread their religion, which was Christianity. Well done to those people. Again, important to have some useful links if you want to do some wider learning on this topic, especially when it comes to the tasks. You might want to look back at these links. Again, I'll attach these to the assignment on Teams if you want to use them, but there's some really good information in these. So we're going to take a few minutes to look through some of the key dates or key events that built up to the Romans finally conquering Britain. Now this is what we looked at last week. 55 BC, Julius Caesar on his first raid. We heard last week about the battle with the tribes on the southern coast, but he had to run away because the army was not powerful enough. He returned to Rome, describing to the people in the Senate, all the important people in Rome, what he'd seen, and convincing them that he had to return. And we covered that last week, didn't we? One Roman legion contained about 5,000 soldiers, but he didn't have enough. He didn't have enough soldiers. Now the second raid returned a year later, in 54 BC. This time he had 5 legions and also 2,000 cavalrymen. If you don't know that word, it means the men on horseback, cavalry. Now this time, the British tribes agreed to pay tributes, so almost like taxes, to Rome, and were therefore left in peace. And Caesar had decided, actually, although there's some great things here, it's not going to be worth a long war. There were other problems that he had to deal with, particularly the tribes in France revolting, rebelling, and other parts of the empire as well. So he thought, we'll settle for this. They're going to pay their tributes, and that'll do for now. Now let's fast forward to AD 43. Now again, a little maths question. How many years have passed between 54 BC and 43 AD? See if you can work that one out. Now, I've got the Claudian Invasion. That was the new emperor Claudius. Julius Caesar is long gone by this point. Now he'd ordered the creation of a new warship, see the picture there below, to help his army cross safely between France, between Gaul and Britain. Now if you remember what happened to Caesar's troops the first time, they couldn't get their boats close enough to shore in order to attack effectively. So Claudius had ordered a new warship to be made. So as well as the 20,000 soldiers in 4 legions, he had auxiliaries which was made up of soldiers who were picked up from other parts of the Roman Empire, so not necessarily Roman soldiers, but people who joined the Roman army. So they could have had some Gaul tribes join as well, some Gallic fighters. Now just as Caesar had done, they set sail and landed on the south coast of Britain. And one of the legions was in fact commanded by a future emperor of Rome. So where Caesar had been unsuccessful, Claudius's army overwhelmed the tribes when they landed, and they quickly took control of the lands. Now at this point, the Celtic tribes realised how strong the army was, and just as in the past the tributes had been made to Rome, the tribes had given in and they agreed to obey Roman laws and pay taxes, and in return they were allowed to keep their kingdoms. Now at the time, Britain was split into different areas, or different kingdoms, different regions, so there wasn't just one monarch, one king or queen. There were 11, in fact there were more than 11 British kings, but there were 11 who surrendered to the Romans. A further king, Caratacus, was defeated and fled. He tried to escape, but he was captured a few years later and then sent to Rome. Now I mentioned those auxiliary soldiers, and as I said, they were recruited from non-Roman tribes. A further key event was, or events rather, over the years AD 60 to 61, involved a very famous, nowadays at least, queen who was leader of one of the tribes, the Iceni tribe in Britain at the time. Now, the Roman governor, or the Roman governors who had been left in charge, continued to expand the Roman control over Britain. And inevitably, some of the tribes wanted to fight back. And one of those tribes, one of the most famous examples, is the Iceni tribe, commanded by Queen Boudica. And Boudica was a very fierce warrior and actually led her tribe to many victories against the Romans. However, she was eventually defeated in AD 61. And rather than being captured, she chose to poison herself. Now, her story was actually not very well known in terms of modern day until Queen Victoria, who you may have heard of. You may have heard of the time in British history, the Victorians. Well, that's when Queen Victoria was around, the 19th century. Made her famous again, so made the story of Boudica famous because she wanted to be associated with Boudica as a fierce female warrior. Moving on a few years, and between AD 96 and 128, we found one of the most relevant events of Roman Britain to us living in the north or the northeast of England, because these were the years in which led up to the construction of Hadrian's Wall. So the initial design of Hadrian's Wall was to keep the Picts out, the warriors from north of the border where the governor hadn't been able to assert control. And so by AD 105, the Picts were coming south and attacking Roman forts, causing a lot of damage, making a nuisance of themselves. Then, some years later, in AD 122, the emperor at the time, Hadrian, ordered that a wall be built between the areas that the Romans controlled and the Picts, the land that the Picts controlled north of that. Now, some of you may have already visited this place, but this wall, Hadrian's Wall, as it's still known, which took 6 years to build, runs all the way from the east coast of England to the west coast, and that's 84 miles. So much of it is still there today. And then finally, the later years of the Roman control of Britain. Now, over time, the Romans continued to try to conquer Scotland and to control the lands above or the north of Hadrian's Wall, but none of those was successful. And Britain continued to prosper, to do well, to thrived, and were able to fend off attacks, so defeat attacks from other tribes or other nations who wanted to invade Britain. But then by the late 4th century, so from 390-ish AD, Roman troops began to be withdrawn from Britain. So they began to move out of Britain following their orders. And then around AD 410, by this time almost all of the Romans had left, and the people of Britain were told that they now had to defend themselves. So these soldiers had moved out of Britain. They'd been sent elsewhere in the Roman Empire to fight. Time. Well, we moved from AD 43, AD 60, 73, 79, 82. We've progressed through the 2nd century as well. Some of these events we've already discussed. This timeline is attached to your team's assignment as well, so you can look over it in more detail. Use the map that we had before and see if you can match up some of the events on the timeline to locations on the map, such as the Romans conquering Wales or Hadrian's Wall being built. You can see that's marked on the map. So lots of information to take in there about what happened after the Romans were finally able to conquer Britain. Now we're going to look at those 3 learning objectives in a bit more detail now. So the first one, identify key events or aspects of Roman Britain. So useful for that is going to be the timeline and some of the other resources as well. Then we're going to examine events from Roman Britain and their importance. So we're going to examine how important they were in terms of our history or how they've affected or impacted modern day life. And then finally, we're going to look at ranking the importance of Roman contributions to Britain. So put them in order of importance. Again, in terms of their impact at the time and how they still impact on today. We talked about these useful links before. Now, I think now is the time, if you haven't done so already, to pause this video and look at some of these links because they're going to be really useful when it comes to completing the tasks. Alright, so have a look at these different links and have a go at doing the task. Remember, these links are attached to the assignment on Teams as well, so you don't just have to copy them from the video. So if you're going to complete the first task to identify key events or aspects of Roman Britain, now as well as the timeline, you may want to use some of these other resources, the maps, the video clips that we've sent the links to, the table, which I'll show you on the next slide, and the keywords as well. So you're going to sort the information in the table. The table is titled, "What did the Romans do for us?" And you're going to identify which ones are true. So which ones are things that the Romans did for us and brought to Britain. You have to work out which ones aren't. I'll give you a clue. There are 5 in there that are not things that the Romans did for us. And there's a little challenge at the end. Which one do you think is the most important? Which has been key for us, for Britain? So this is the table here that I was referring to. What did the Romans do for us? So there are 15 things within the table. Can you find the 10 that are true and the 5 that are not true? So some of the best things are going to be to help you with this one are those links that I mentioned earlier. There's some really good information there that will help you identify which ones are aspects of Roman Britain. And then, as I said at the end, if you can, challenge yourself to decide which is the most important. So for the next learning objective, the task is slightly different. Now you can use that table again. So you can use the table, what did the Romans do for us? And if you can identify those genuine influences on Britain, the Roman influences, can you decide which 3 have had the most impact? So for example, roads. And we still use some of the Roman routes today. The roads that were laid many hundreds of years ago, we still use some of those same routes today. And then challenge to think about which of those had the least importance, or had the least impact on modern day Britain. So those events from Roman Britain, which ones had the most impact and which ones had the least. Now this next task that we're going to look at, I'm going to show you this first because this is called a Diamond 9, in which you rank objects, events or information from most to least important. So you start at the top with the most important and then the least important. Now we said there were 10 items within that table. However, you're going to select 9 of them, 9 genuine ones to use for your next task if you're going to complete that one. So the task that matches that final learning objective to rank the importance of Roman contributions to Britain. So once you've sorted out those aspects of the table, as we said in the previous tasks, then I would like you to complete that Diamond 9 activity. We've been through the explanation already. And then after that, if you read through the poem that is attached to the assignment on Teams, the poem "What Did the Romans Do for Us" by John Bratton, if you use that as inspiration, see if you can compose your own ode poem to Roman influences on British life. So maybe you can add a few stanzas in the same style of poem, or you could come with your own poem entirely. As always, you can complete your task in your exercise book or save a Word document. Remember to write the learn objective of the task that you are doing at the start. If you want to have a go at more than one of the tasks, write the learn objective next to each task so you know which one's which. And then you can upload your document or a picture of your work to the assignment on Teams, or email your work to the Year 4 email address, which is there below. And finally, before we finish, I said we'd look back at the start of the task. Here is a map with some of those answers on. So if you took some time to go through the map task at the start, you can use this final image on the video to help check some of your answers. Okay, that's it for today. Looking forward to seeing the work on Teams. Bye for now, Year 4.